Welcome to Lost at 3 a.m. Put your phone down, close your eyes, and let this be the last video you hear tonight. Relax, breathe, and let's begin. Imagine waking up in a vast, silent world. No instructions, no markers on a map telling you what to do. Just a quiet wind, the distant call of birds, and the endless horizon stretching before you. That's how The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild begins, and in that moment, you realize you're free. More than just a video game, Breath of the Wild is an experience. It's about curiosity, discovery, and the joy of getting lost in a world that feels truly alive. Unlike any Zelda game before it, this one didn't hold your hand. There were no strict paths, no set order of events, only possibilities, waiting to be explored. From the moment you step out of the Shrine of Resurrection and look over the Great Plateau, the game doesn't tell you what to do. Instead, it invites you. You can climb mountains, glide through the air, or walk straight into danger. You can gather food, experiment with fire, or chase a fox just to see where it leads. Every action has consequences, and every journey is your own. This was a bold, new direction for the Zelda series. One that redefined what an open-world game could be. It wasn't just about size, it was about freedom. It was about a world that didn't exist for you, but one that simply existed, waiting for you to leave your mark. Tonight, we're diving deep into Breath of the Wild, its world, its mechanics, and the small, beautiful details that make it one of the most unforgettable games ever made. So close your eyes, picture the rolling green hills of Hyrule, and let's begin. When Breath of the Wild was first announced, no one knew just how much it would break away from tradition. For over 30 years, The Legend of Zelda followed a familiar structure. Explore, find dungeons, collect items, defeat bosses, and repeat. But this time, everything changed. Nintendo didn't just want to make another Zelda game, they wanted to reinvent the series. The developers looked back to the very first Zelda game from 1986, where players were simply dropped into the world with little direction, forced to figure things out on their own. That sense of true exploration, of finding your way without a glowing path guiding you, became the foundation for Breath of the Wild. Gone were the linear dungeons and the traditional formula of getting an item and using it to progress. Instead, Nintendo built a massive open world where you could go anywhere, tackle challenges in any order, and even march straight to the final boss if you were brave enough. The biggest shift was player freedom. No two people played Breath of the Wild the same way. Some stormed through battles, others carefully crafted meals and potions. Some ignored the main quest for hours, simply getting lost in the beauty of Hyrule. Unlike past Zelda games, where dungeons and puzzles had one correct solution, Breath of the Wild encouraged experimentation. You could climb over a puzzle instead of solving it. You could fight enemies or sneak past them. You could even skip entire challenges if you found a clever workaround. This wasn't just a new Zelda game. It was a complete rethinking of what the series could be. And by stepping away from tradition, Nintendo created one of the most immersive and rewarding open-world experiences ever made. From the moment Link steps onto the Great Plateau, it's clear that Breath of the Wild isn't just big, it's alive. This isn't a game where the world waits for you to act. It's a living, breathing Hyrule filled with secrets, surprises, and a level of freedom rarely seen in gaming. The sheer scale of Hyrule is breathtaking. Rolling green fields, towering mountains, dense forests, vast deserts. It all feels endless. But it's not just the size that makes it special, it's the way everything reacts to you. Birds scatter when you run through grass, deer cautiously watch you, and enemies sit around campfires, unaware of the chaos you're about to bring. Unlike other open-world games, Breath of the Wild doesn't rely on waypoints or objectives to push you forward. There's no checklist telling you what to do next. Instead, Nintendo designed a world that simply makes you curious. You see a strange rock formation in the distance. What's there? You notice smoke rising from behind a hill. Is it a traveler, a monster camp, or something else entirely? Every part of Hyrule is crafted to make you explore, not because you have to, but because you want to. Then there's the climbing mechanic, which changed open world exploration forever. If you can see something, you can climb it. No invisible walls, no artificial barriers. This one simple mechanic transformed Hyrule into a true sandbox, where the world wasn't just a backdrop, but a puzzle to interact with. And let's not forget about the weather and physics system. Rain makes climbing difficult. Lightning seeks out metal, forcing you to rethink your equipment. Wind can push fire, setting entire enemy camps ablaze. Every element of the world connects, reacts, and feels real. This isn't just an open world, it's a world that feels like it exists beyond the player. A world that's unpredictable, dynamic, and always waiting to be discovered. And that's what makes it truly magical. For decades, Zelda games were known for their massive, intricate dungeons. Each one a carefully designed maze filled with puzzles, enemies, and a powerful boss waiting at the end. But Breath of the Wild did something completely different. It broke the dungeon formula apart, replacing it with something new: shrines and divine beasts. Instead of a handful of large dungeons, the game introduced 120 shrines, scattered all across Hyrule. Each shrine was a bite-sized puzzle, offering a mix of physics challenges, combat trials, and brain-teasing mechanics. Some were as simple as lifting an object with magnesis, while others forced you to think in entirely new ways, using wind, fire, electricity, or even motion controls to solve puzzles. What made shrines so special was how they rewarded creativity. Unlike traditional Zelda puzzles, which often had one correct solution, shrines encouraged players to experiment. There were often multiple ways to complete a challenge. Maybe you'd use stasis to launch a block across the room, or maybe you'd build your own bridge with metal objects. Every player's approach was different, making the experience feel deeply personal. Then there were the divine beasts, Breath of the Wild's answer to traditional dungeons. Unlike past Zelda games, where dungeons were locked to specific areas, the divine beasts were gigantic mechanical creatures roaming the land, waiting for you to tame them. Each divine beast was its own interactive puzzle, where Link could control the structure itself, tilting, rotating, or shifting parts of the dungeon to create new pathways. It was a completely new way of thinking about Zelda puzzles, forcing players to manipulate their environment instead of just moving through it. And at the heart of each divine beast was a unique boss fight. Unlike anything the series had done before, these weren't just powerful enemies, they were corrupt forms of Ganon's malice, each one with terrifying abilities and weaknesses that required quick thinking and adaptability. By replacing traditional dungeons with smaller, more flexible puzzle challenges, Breath of the Wild gave players freedom to solve things in their own way, at their own pace, and in any order they wanted. It was a risky change, but it paid off because it made Breath of the Wild feel truly open-ended, where every step forward was a discovery, and every challenge had infinite possibilities. In past Zelda games, Link was always a hero on a set path, collecting weapons, solving puzzles, and defeating bosses in a structured way. But Breath of the Wild changed everything. This time, Link wasn't just an adventurer, he was a survivor. For the first time in the series, Breath of the Wild introduced survival mechanics that forced players to think beyond combat and puzzles. Link had to eat to regain health, craft elixirs for boosts, and adapt to harsh environments. Gone were the days of simply finding hearts in pots. Now you had to hunt, cook, and prepare for every challenge ahead. Cooking became one of the most important mechanics in the game. Players could combine ingredients to make meals that restored health, boosted stamina, or even made Link resistant to extreme temperatures. Experimenting with recipes led to some hilarious moments, like accidentally making dubious food, a blurred-out mystery dish that even Link refused to look at. But it wasn't just about food. The world itself fought against you. The cold of the mountains would drain Link's health unless he wore the right clothes or lit a torch to stay warm. The heat of the Gerudo Desert would overheat him during the day and freeze him at night. Rain made climbing harder, forcing players to either wait out storms or find creative ways to move forward. Then there was the stamina system, a feature that completely changed how players explored Hyrule. Climbing mountains, gliding through the sky, and sprinting through fields all required careful resource management. Every decision mattered. Do you push forward up a steep cliff, hoping your stamina doesn't run out? Or do you play it safe and find another way? Weapons also played a huge role in Link's survival. Unlike previous Zelda games, where you'd find a powerful sword and keep it for the entire game, Breath of the Wild introduced weapon durability, meaning every sword, bow, and shield could break. This forced players to constantly adapt, picking up whatever they could find, using strategy instead of brute force. This survival-focused gameplay made Breath of the Wild feel more immersive and unpredictable than any Zelda game before it. It wasn't just about being a hero on a quest. It was about learning how to survive, how to experiment, and how to thrive in a world that didn't hold your hand. And that's what made every victory, every discovery, and every moment of progress feel completely earned. Breath of the Wild didn't just change the way Zelda games played, it changed the way they told stories. Instead of a linear narrative guiding you from one event to the next, the game let you piece together the story at your own pace, making every discovery feel personal. At the core of the story is a world that has already fallen. Unlike previous Zelda games, where the main quest was about preventing disaster, Breath of the Wild begins after Ganon has already won. Hyrule is in ruins, the champions are gone, and Zelda has been holding back Calamity Ganon for a century, waiting for Link to awaken. But here's what makes the storytelling unique. The past is not told to you outright. Instead, you find it through exploration, through old ruins, through the memories scattered across Hyrule. Link, having lost all his memories, must piece together who he was before the Great Calamity. Players can search for 18 hidden memory locations, each revealing a flashback of Zelda's struggle, her fears, and her growing connection to Link. Unlike previous games where Zelda is simply a goal to reach at the end, this time we get to see her as a fully realized character, one who is deeply conflicted about her destiny, one who feels powerless in the face of Ganon, and one who ultimately finds her strength. The lack of traditional cutscenes or forced storytelling also means that every player experiences the story differently. Some players might uncover Zelda's memories early on, while others may go straight to Ganon without ever seeing them. The game never forces you to engage with the story. It lets you find it, letting the world itself serve as the ultimate storyteller. And then there are the small details woven into the environment. The ruins of Hyrule Castle are filled with remnants of the past, old battle scars, broken weapons, and books that tell the last moments of the fallen kingdom. The divine beasts, now corrupted, once stood as protectors, their destruction a silent reminder of what was lost. Even the NPCs scattered across Hyrule have fragments of history, sharing stories about the Great Calamity in passing conversations. Breath of the Wild proved that storytelling doesn't need to be cinematic or linear to be powerful. Sometimes, the best stories are the ones you discover on your own, making every revelation feel more real, more personal, and more rewarding. And that's why, even long after the credits roll, the world of Breath of the Wild stays with you. One of the most groundbreaking aspects of Breath of the Wild isn't just its open world, it's how that world reacts to you. Unlike most games, where mechanics are set in stone, Breath of the Wild encourages creativity, experimentation, and problem-solving in ways no Zelda game ever had before. At the heart of this is the physics engine. Every object in the game reacts in a way that makes sense. Fire spreads naturally, metal attracts lightning, and wind can carry airborne objects. This means that instead of solving puzzles the way the developers intended, players can come up with wildly creative solutions that even Nintendo didn't expect. For example, if a gap is too far to jump, you could chop down a tree to make a bridge. If you run out of arrows, you could use stasis to freeze a rock, hit it a few times, and launch it toward an enemy instead. If a treasure chest is stuck underwater, you don't need a hookshot. Just use cryonis to lift it out of the lake. Combat also follows this physics-based creativity. Instead of just swinging a sword, you can roll boulders onto enemies, set grass on fire to create updrafts, or use magnesis to throw metal objects at unsuspecting foes. Even a simple act like dropping a piece of meat can be a distraction that lures enemies away from their posts. Then there's the speedrunning and player creativity that has taken Breath of the Wild to another level. Players have found ways to launch themselves across Hyrule using bomb explosions, shield surf at impossible speeds, and even beat the game in less than 30 minutes. The game's mechanics are so open-ended that the community is constantly finding new ways to break the game, discovering techniques Nintendo never intended. This freedom isn't just limited to physics, it applies to puzzle solving too. Shrines don't have just one solution. If you can think of a way to manipulate the environment, you can probably make it work. Some players complete shrines in completely unintended ways, using bombs, ice, or even just brute force to skip puzzles entirely. That's what makes Breath of the Wild so unique. It doesn't just give you a world to explore, it gives you the tools to interact with that world in ways no other game does. It's not just an open world, it's your playground. For decades, The Legend of Zelda was known for its grand, orchestral themes. Iconic melodies like the Overworld theme, Zelda's Lullaby, and Gerudo Valley that instantly transported players into Hyrule. But Breath of the Wild did something completely different. Instead of a booming, adventurous soundtrack, the game's music is quiet, subtle, and deeply atmospheric. At first it feels almost empty, but that's the magic of it. This isn't just a game to play, it's a world to exist in. The soft piano notes that occasionally drift through the air don't tell you what to feel, they simply accompany the experience, allowing the world itself to take center stage. When you're exploring, there's no constant background music. Instead, you hear the wind, the rustling of grass, the distant sound of a waterfall. When a gentle melody does appear, it's not to demand attention, it's to reflect the mood of the moment. Take the morning theme, for example, a simple piano tune that plays as the sun rises, making the start of a new in-game day feel peaceful and fresh. Or the stable theme, a soft, nostalgic piece that gently reminds you of classic Zelda melodies, offering a sense of comfort and familiarity. And then there's Hyrule Castle. While most of Breath of the Wild is quiet and understated, the moment you step into the ruined castle, the full orchestra returns, blending classic Zelda motifs with a new, more urgent sound. It's a powerful contrast, a reminder that after all your wandering, this is where the real battle begins. Even battles have a different feel. Instead of a traditional combat theme, fights are scored with dynamic, unpredictable piano notes, creating a sense of tension and improvisation. The game doesn't tell you whether you're winning or losing, you just feel it in the way the music shifts. This minimalist approach made Breath of the Wild feel unlike any other Zelda game. Instead of overwhelming you with grand themes, it lets you breathe, lets you exist in the world, and lets your own emotions shape the experience. The soundtrack isn't just background music, it's a companion. One that never tells you what to feel, but instead lets you feel it for yourself. Some games come and go, others change the industry forever. Breath of the Wild didn't just redefine Zelda, it reshaped the entire open world genre, setting a new standard for what a video game world could be. When it was released in 2017, it was an instant classic. Critics praised its freedom, creativity, and sense of discovery. Players got lost in Hyrule for hundreds of hours, not because the game forced them to, but because the world was simply too fascinating to leave behind. And its influence didn't stop at Zelda. The open world genre was forever changed. Games that came after, like Elden Ring, Genshin Impact, and Horizon Forbidden West, all borrowed elements from Breath of the Wild. Developers across the industry began rethinking how open world should work. Suddenly, waypoints, rigid quest markers, and scripted sequences felt outdated. The new standard was freedom, curiosity, and player-driven exploration. Nintendo itself saw the power of what they had created. Tears of the Kingdom built directly on Breath of the Wild's foundation, expanding its mechanics with Sky Islands, underground exploration, and a whole new level of creativity with Ultra Hand and Zonai devices. It wasn't just a sequel, it was proof that Breath of the Wild had laid the groundwork for a new era of Zelda games. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Breath of the Wild's legacy is that players are still discovering new things years after its release. Speedrunners continue to push the game to its limits, casual players still find hidden secrets, and the community keeps the world alive with theories, discoveries, and creative challenges. It's rare for a game to feel truly timeless, but Breath of the Wild isn't just a game, it's an experience, a world that still feels full of mystery, adventure, and wonder. And that's why, long after the last shrine has been completed and the final battle has been won, players keep coming back. Because some journeys never really end. Some games are exciting in the moment, others become legendary, standing the test of time long after the credits roll. Breath of the Wild isn't just a great game, it's an experience that stays with you, one that players return to over and over, discovering something new every time. What makes it so special isn't just its open world, its freedom, or its mechanics. It's the feeling it gives you, the feeling of standing on a mountaintop, looking at the world below, knowing you can go anywhere. The feeling of stumbling upon a hidden cave, a secret shrine, or a mysterious traveler with a story to tell. The feeling of getting lost in Hyrule, not because you have to, but because you want to. It's a game that never rushes you. It never tells you where to go, never forces you into a mission, never holds your hand. Instead, it invites you to play, to explore, to experiment, to create your own adventure. And that's why it's timeless. No two players will ever have the same journey. No two experiences will ever be identical. Every time you start a new game, Breath of the Wild gives you a different story, a new adventure, a fresh sense of wonder. Even years after its release, the world still feels alive. Players are still discovering hidden secrets, testing new ideas, and pushing the game to its limits. And that's what makes it truly magical. Breath of the Wild isn't just a game you finish. It's a game that stays with you, long after you put down the controller. Because Breath of the Wild isn't just about saving Hyrule. It's about getting lost, finding your own path, and experiencing a world that feels limitless. Thank you for spending your night with Lost at 3 AM. Sweet dreams, and we'll see you next time.